Sometimes the smallest acts of kindness go unnoticed till they change a life forever. Mara had always been the kind of person who noticed the little things that most people overlooked. She worked as a cashier in a small, busy grocery store in a quiet neighborhood, where every day she scanned items, bagged groceries, and exchanged polite greetings with hundreds of customers. But what really set Mara apart was not how fast she worked or how accurately she handled the cash register. It was her kindness. She had a way of making people feel seen, even when they themselves felt invisible. A simple smile from her could lift someone's spirits. A gentle word could ease someone's stress. And she never asked for anything in return. Most days. Mara's acts of kindness were small and almost unnoticed. She would notice an elderly woman struggling to reach the top shelf, and without being asked, she would step over, lift the can down, and hand it to her with a warm smile. She would see a mother with a fussy child at the checkout line and engage the child in a little conversation, making the mother laugh and easing her tension. Sometimes she would quietly pay the extra few coins when someone didn't have enough to cover their groceries. No one ever seemed to notice these things. Not really. Customers thanked her politely, but they never paused to recognize the depth of her empathy. Her coworkers sometimes joked about how she always gave away so much of herself, as if she were invisible to the world's recognition, but Mara didn't mind. She believed that kindness didn't need applause. It was a quiet way of living that she had learned from her mother, who had always taught her that helping others without expecting anything back was one of the purest forms of happiness. Mara's life outside the store was far from easy. She lived in a small apartment with her younger brother Sam, who was only 10. Their parents had passed away several years earlier, leaving her as Sam's guardian. The responsibility weighed heavily on her. Every paycheck had to stretch to cover rent, groceries, bills, and school supplies. Yet even in the midst of her own struggles, she never let her frustration show. Mara had a kind of resilience that was quietly inspiring. When she came home exhausted after a long day of work, she would still spend hours helping Sam with homework, making dinner, and listening to him talk about his day. She never complained. She never let him see the stress in her eyes. In her own way, she was trying to teach Sam the same lessons she had learned about compassion and generosity, even though she worked hard and tried to balance everything in her life. Mara often felt invisible. She noticed how other people seemed to receive recognition and rewards effortlessly while she remained in the background. Her small acts of kindness felt like whispers in a loud, busy world where no one really had the time to notice the quiet efforts of a cashier in a small store. Sometimes she wondered if it made any difference at all, if the little gestures mattered, or if she was wasting her energy on people who would never even remember her name. But she never let that stop her from helping. She had seen enough small acts of kindness ripple into unexpected joy to know that, even if no one recognized her now, her efforts were not meaningless. Her coworkers often treated her with a mixture of admiration and gentle teasing. They knew Mara had a heart bigger than most people they had ever met, but they also knew she never sought recognition. JS, one of the older cashiers, called her one morning, using a nickname she had picked up in high school. "You really are too nice sometimes. People take advantage, you know." Mara just smiled and shook her head. "Maybe," she said softly, "but if it makes their day better, then it's worth it." She didn't need them to understand her. Mara had learned to be content with her own quiet satisfaction. The feeling that she was doing the right thing. Even when the world seemed to overlook her, Mara's days followed a simple rhythm, but in that simplicity was a kind of beauty. She noticed details others missed: the tired eyes of a customer juggling multiple bags, the nervous hands of someone buying medicine for a sick family member, the joy in a child's eyes when she made a small joke to make them laugh. Each interaction was an opportunity to give a little comfort, a little hope. Even when the customers left without a word, Mara held on to the knowledge that these small gestures mattered. She understood that kindness often went unnoticed, but it had a quiet power all its own. Despite her quiet life, Mara dreamed of something bigger. She wanted to make a difference in her community, to help people beyond the walls of the grocery store. But the responsibilities she carried, the bills she had to pay, the limited opportunities available to her made her feel trapped. Still, she'll never let go of her desire to help. She read books at night about social work, volunteering, and community service. She imagined a future where she could touch more lives, make real change, and inspire others to care. And in those quiet moments, when she allowed herself to dream, Mara felt a spark of hope, a belief that one day, the kindness she gave so freely would find its way back to her in ways she could never imagine. Even in her quiet struggles, Mara remained hopeful. She believed that the world could be better if people cared more about one another. If even a few acts of genuine kindness could change someone's day, their mood, or even their life. And so, she continued her work day after day, smiling at strangers, helping those in need, and never expecting anything in return. She had accepted that most of her actions would remain unnoticed, that the world might never recognize the depth of her heart. But Mara's kindness was not for recognition. It was a part of who she was, a reflection of her character, and a light she chose to shine no matter how dim the world sometimes seemed. Through it all, Mara's life was a quiet testament to the power of compassion. She showed that even in a world that often overlooked the little things, a single person's kindness could matter. She believed that every small act, a smile, a helping hand, a moment of patience had the potential to make someone's day better. And while she thought no one noticed, in reality, every gesture planted a seed, leaving an invisible trail of hope and warmth in the lives of those she touched. The rain fell in steady sheets that evening, turning the small streets into shimmering rivers of reflected lights from the street lamps. Mara pulled her thin jacket tighter around her, shielding herself from the wet, and hurried toward the grocery store where she worked. It had been a long day, full of customers and small moments that required patience, kindness, and energy, but she didn't mind. Helping people, even in tiny ways, gave her a sense of purpose that no paycheck could ever match. The store was quiet that evening, with only a few customers wandering the aisles. Mara was stacking items and checking expiration dates when she noticed an elderly man struggling at the checkout counter. He fumbled with his wallet, flipping through bills and coins with shaking hands. Every few moments, he would sigh and glance around, clearly embarrassed. Mara had seen this situation many times before. She understood that it was not pride, but circumstances that had brought him here. And she felt a tug of empathy for him. She walked over with a warm smile. "Do you need some help, sir?" she asked gently. The man looked up, his face lined with age and worry. He nodded, and she patiently guided him through the process, counting out the coins he had and helping him organize the bills. But when it came time to pay, she noticed his face fall. His card had been declined. "Oh no," he muttered, looking mortified. "I don't understand. I have enough." Mara could see that he truly did not have enough cash to cover the groceries. But she also noticed the small items in his cart, nothing extravagant. Just necessities, bread, milk, vegetables, and a few cans of soup. She didn't hesitate. Without thinking twice, she reached into her own pocket, quietly handed him the money to cover the remainder, and smiled. "It's okay, sir. Don't worry about it. Here, I'll take care of it." The man's eyes widened, a mixture of surprise and gratitude. He tried to protest, but Mara shook her head. "No need. It's just a little help," she said softly. She carefully placed his groceries in paper bags and offered to carry them to his car. The rain had made the parking lot slippery. She didn't want him to risk falling. As they walked together, he began to speak. His voice was hesitant at first, but as Mara listened patiently, he shared small fragments of his life: a son who lived far away, a daughter-in-law who didn't understand him, and the loneliness that came with age. Mara didn't interrupt or judge. She just listened, offering nods and soft words of encouragement. When they reached his car, he shook her hand with unexpected warmth. "Thank you," he said. "You are very special." Mara smiled, brushing off the praise. "I'm just doing what I can," she replied. She didn't realize at the time that the man she had helped was no ordinary customer. He was Arthur Hale, a billionaire who was rarely seen in public, and even more rarely noticed for his true self behind the media headlines. To him, Mara's actions were not just kind. They were extraordinary in a world where people often pretended to care for appearances or personal gain. The encounter stayed with Mara as she returned to the store. She went back to the register, helped a few remaining customers, and completed her shift, all while thinking little of what had happened. To her, it was just another day, another opportunity to help someone. But for Arthur, the moment had left a deep impression. He had encountered countless people in his life, many of whom were polite or courteous, but very few had shown genuine empathy without expecting anything in return. Mara's patience, humility, sincere kindness were rare qualities that he could not ignore. After that day, Mara continued her routine. She helped the regulars, chatted with the children who came in with their parents, and offered smiles to anyone who seemed troubled. She had no idea that she had left a lasting mark on someone whose life was vastly different from hers. Arthur, on the other hand, could not stop thinking about her. He remembered her eyes, the quiet way she listened, and the way she had treated him not as a wealthy man, but simply as a human being in need. That weekend, he returned to the store. He didn't announce himself or draw attention. He simply walked in, dressed plainly, as if he were just another customer. Mara was busy at the register, scanning items, when she noticed him standing near the end of an aisle, observing. There was something familiar about him, but she was too busy to make the connection. He waited patiently, never interrupting her work, never drawing attention to himself. When it was finally his turn at the register, he spoke. "I was here the other day," he said quietly. "You helped me when I needed it. I wanted to thank you properly." Mara blinked in surprise, suddenly remembering the man she had helped in the rain. She felt a little embarrassed at being recognized, but smiled politely. "It was no problem at all," she replied. "I just did what anyone would do." Arthur shook his head. "No, not anyone would do what you did. You have a rare heart. I've never met anyone who offered help so sincerely without asking for anything in return." Mara felt a warmth in her chest, but tried to downplay it. She was used to being kind and believed it was normal, even if unnoticed. But Arthur's words struck a chord because they came from someone whose opinion carried weight and whose life was nothing like hers. Over the next few weeks, Arthur returned occasionally, sometimes purchasing small items, sometimes just observing quietly. Mara continued her work, unaware that her simple, everyday kindness was being carefully noted. To Arthur, Mara represented something he had rarely encountered in his life: genuine care without agenda, humility without pretension, and the quiet strength of someone who helped others even when the world overlooked her. Mara's life carried on. With all the usual challenges, she still worked long shifts, cared for her brother, and struggled to make ends meet. But unknown to her, a seed had been planted, a connection that was growing silently, quietly in the background. Her small act of helping a stranger in need had created a ripple, one that would change her life in ways she could never imagine. And even though she thought her kindness went unnoticed for one man, it had made an unforgettable impression. Through it all, Mara never realized how extraordinary her actions were. She never sought recognition, she never expected gratitude, and she never imagined that helping someone on a rainy evening could lead to life-altering consequences. She simply acted from her heart, showing patience, empathy, and humanity, qualities that shone brightly, even in the darkest or most overlooked corners of the world. And for Arthur Hale, that evening in the rain was a moment that would linger forever, a reminder that real kindness could still exist in the simplest, most unexpected forms. Arthur Hale returned to the small grocery store on a quiet Thursday afternoon. Unlike the first time, when the rain had hidden him in the shadows, today he walked in casually, dressed in an ordinary jacket and simple shoes. He moved slowly down the aisles, as if he were a regular customer, picking up a few items without drawing attention to himself. Mara, busy at her register, didn't notice him at first. Her mind was focused on her work, scanning items, greeting customers, and juggling the small but constant demands of the store. She had no idea that the man from the rainy evening, whose groceries she had quietly paid for, was now standing in front of her again. When he finally reached the checkout counter, Mara looked up and recognized him immediately. The memory of the rainy evening flashed through her mind, the way he had struggled to pay, his nervousness, and the relief on his face when she had helped him. "Hello," she said softly, smiling. He returned the smile, but it was different this time. There was something deeper in his eyes. Okay. A mix of appreciation and curiosity. I wanted to see you again, he said, his voice quiet but steady. I've been thinking about that day. The way you helped me. Mara shook her head, slightly embarrassed. It was nothing, she said. I just did what anyone would do. You were in trouble, and I helped. But Arthur's expression told her that he didn't see it that way. No, it was more than that, he said. It's rare to meet someone who is genuinely kind, without expecting anything in return. Most people help for recognition or benefit. You did it just because it was the right thing to do. Mara felt a warm flush rise to her cheeks. She wasn't used to compliments, especially ones that came from someone so important and powerful. She had always believed that acts of kindness were private, invisible, and valuable only to the person receiving them. She never imagined that someone of Arthur's status would notice or care. For the next few minutes, he talked quietly while Mara scanned his items. She noticed that he didn't treat her like a wealthy man or as someone to be impressed by. He was just a man who had experienced her compassion firsthand. This made Mara feel comfortable. She realized that he genuinely wanted to understand her, not judge her or put her on display. After he paid, Arthur paused and looked at her seriously. You have a special way of seeing people, he said. You notice things others miss. You care when most people ignore. It's rare and it's remarkable. Mara wanted to brush it off, but she couldn't help feeling a sense of pride mixed with disbelief. No one had ever spoken to her like that before. No one had ever recognized the quiet strength and patience she had tried so hard to maintain. Over the next few days, Arthur returned several times, each visit brief but intentional. He observed how Mara interacted with other customers, how she treated everyone with the same care and attention, regardless of who they were. She helped a young mother struggling to calm her crying baby, assisted a man who had accidentally dropped his groceries, and encouraged a shy teenager to smile when he came to the register. Arthur watched silently, impressed by the consistency and authenticity of her actions. Mara, as usual, did not notice him watching. She was simply being herself, performing the same small acts of kindness she had always done, unaware of the profound impact she was having on the man observing her. One afternoon, after the store had quieted down and Mara was restocking shelves, Arthur approached her more directly. Would you have time to talk? He asked. Mara was surprised but nodded, curious about why he seemed so interested in her life. They moved to a small corner of the store where no customers could hear them. Arthur began to ask questions, not about his wealth or his power, but about her life, her family, her struggles, her dreams. Mara, usually reserved about her personal life, found herself opening up in a way she hadn't expected. She spoke about her younger brother, Sam, and the responsibilities she carried since their parents had passed. She shared her worries about money, school expenses, and the difficulty of balancing work with caring for Sam. She talked about her small dreams, dreams of helping people in her community, dreams of doing something meaningful beyond the grocery store, but also fears that her circumstances would never allow it. Arthur listened attentively, never interrupting, never judging. He simply absorbed her words, impressed by her resilience and the selflessness with which she lived her life. When Mara finished speaking, she looked down at her hands, unsure of what to say next. Arthur smiled kindly. You've been through so much, yet you still help others without expecting anything. That's extraordinary. Most people would be frustrated, angry, or overwhelmed. You have a heart that most people never develop in a lifetime. Mara felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. She had never heard anyone acknowledge her like this before. Most of the time, people saw her as just a cashier, just a girl doing her job. But Arthur's words made her feel seen, truly seen for the first time in years. Arthur didn't stop there. I want to help you, he said gently. Not because I expect anything from you, but because I see your potential. You have a gift, compassion, patience, empathy, and the world needs more people like you. I want to give you an opportunity to grow, to pursue your dreams, whatever they may be. Mara was stunned. She had never imagined that someone like him could care about her in this way. She stammered, trying to find the right words, but nothing seemed adequate. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "You don't have to say anything right now," Arthur replied. "Just know that I believe in you, and I want to support you. You've already made a difference in my life simply by being yourself. Imagine what you could do if you had a little help." Mara looked at him, her mind racing. She had always dreamed of helping others, but the financial and personal burdens in her life had always seemed insurmountable. Now, here was someone offering her a chance she had never dared to hope for. For the first time, Mara realized that the world might actually notice her kindness, that it might have consequences beyond the immediate moment of helping someone in need. She began to see that her small, everyday actions, the ones she had always thought were invisible and insignificant, could matter in ways she had never imagined. Arthur had shown her that compassion, when genuine, could not only touch individual lives, but could also inspire and create opportunities she had never thought possible. In the following weeks, Mara and Arthur met quietly outside the store, discussing plans and possibilities. He offered guidance, advice, and most importantly, belief in her potential. Mara began to see herself in a new light. No longer was she just a kind girl doing unnoticed good deeds. She was someone who had the ability to make a lasting impact, someone whose life could grow into something far beyond what she had imagined. Through it all, Mara never changed her behavior. She continued her small acts of kindness, treating every customer with the same patience and care. But now, there was a new sense of hope in her heart. She realized that even if the world did not always recognize goodness, there were people who could, and when they did, it could change everything. Arthur's attention was a reminder that quiet, sincere compassion had power, and that her life was about to take a turn she had never expected. And so, Mara continued her work in the grocery store, smiling at customers, helping those in need, and quietly making the world a better place, while Arthur Hale, the billionaire who had rarely seen genuine kindness, observed and prepared to offer her a chance that could transform her life forever. Her simple acts, once unnoticed, were now the foundation of something much bigger, a ripple that would grow far beyond her small world. A few weeks after their first quiet conversations, Arthur Hale invited Mara to meet him for lunch. Mara felt nervous and uncertain. She had never met someone like him before, someone whose wealth and influence could shape the lives of hundreds, perhaps thousands. And yet here he was, asking to spend time with her, not as a business acquaintance or a celebrity, but simply as someone who had been touched by her kindness. She hesitated at first, unsure if she deserved such attention, but curiosity and a quiet sense of hope pushed her to say yes. The restaurant was small and cozy, with sunlight streaming through large windows and a gentle hum of conversation in the background. Mara felt out of place at first, nervous about her simple outfit compared to the upscale surroundings, but Arthur's calm presence eased her tension. He greeted her warmly, not with the formality one might expect from a billionaire, but with genuine friendliness. Mara couldn't help but feel comfortable almost immediately as they sat down and ordered their meals. Arthur began to speak not about himself, but about her. He asked questions about her family, about her younger brother Sam, and about the daily struggles she faced, trying to balance work and home life. Mara shared her experiences hesitantly at first, unsure how much to reveal, but his listening was patient and sincere. She spoke about the long shifts at the grocery store, the exhaustion she often felt, and the constant worry about paying bills and supporting Sam. She even admitted quietly how she sometimes wondered if her small acts of kindness were truly making a difference, or if they were invisible in the grand scheme of the world. Arthur listened intently, never interrupting, never judging. When she finished, he leaned forward slightly and said, "Mara, you have no idea how extraordinary you are. You give without expecting anything. You care for others, while carrying your own burdens. And you face every day with courage and patience. That is rare. Most people never learn to do what you do naturally." Mara felt her eyes sting with emotion. She had spent years believing that her quiet efforts went unnoticed, that no one truly valued the little ways she tried to make life easier for others. Now, hearing those words from someone she respected deeply, she felt a mixture of disbelief and gratitude. Arthur paused, taking a sip of his coffee, and then spoke again more seriously. I want to help you. Not because I expect anything in return, but because I see your potential. You have a gift, a kind heart, patience, resilience. These are qualities that the world desperately needs. And I believe that with a little support, you could do so much more than you are doing now. You could reach more people, help more families, and build a life you have always dreamed of. Mara's mind raced. She had never imagined that someone like him would offer her such an opportunity. She had dreamed of helping others, of doing meaningful work, but she had always felt trapped by her circumstances. Unsure how to make those dreams real, Arthur continued. I can help you with your education, with resources to pursue the career you want, or even support a community project you are passionate about. Whatever path you choose, I want to provide the support that lets you succeed without the burden of constant financial worry. Mara's hands trembled slightly as she processed his words. She felt overwhelmed by the generosity, but also by the realization that someone truly saw her for who she was, not just a cashier in a small store, but a person capable of making a real difference in the world. For a long moment, she was silent. She wanted to accept, but at the same time, she was cautious. She had spent so many years giving without expectation that the idea of receiving felt strange, almost uncomfortable. She worried about what it might mean to accept such help, about losing her independence, or about not being able to live up to the expectations of someone like Arthur. But as she looked into his calm, understanding eyes, she realized that he did not want to control her life or impose his vision on her. He simply wanted to give her the chance to grow, to follow her own dreams. Finally, she nodded slowly. I don't know what to say. I never imagined anyone would notice me like this, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Arthur smiled gently. You don't have to say anything. Just know that I believe in you and that I want to help you reach your potential. You've already made a difference in my life simply by being yourself. Imagine what you could do if given the chance to fully pursue your dreams. In the days that followed, Mara began to understand the possibilities that had opened up for her. Arthur helped her explore options for continuing her education and social work, a field she had always been passionate about but had never been able to afford. He introduced her to mentors, helped her with applications, and provided financial support that lifted a heavy burden from her shoulders. Mara was amazed at how quickly her world began to change. She could focus on her studies, on her future, and still continue her small acts of kindness in the store. Now, knowing that her efforts were valued and that she had someone supporting her growth, even with this new support, Mara remained humble. She continued to work at the grocery store, helping customers with the same care and attention she always had. But now, there was a renewed sense of purpose in her actions. She realized that her kindness could be amplified, that the quiet compassion she had always shown could reach far beyond the small moments in her store. She started volunteering in local community projects, mentoring young children, and finding ways to use her growing resources to make a tangible difference in her neighborhood. Arthur remained a quiet but steady presence in her life. He never demanded recognition or gratitude. He simply offered guidance, resources, and belief. Mara felt grateful, but more than that, she felt inspired. She began to see herself not just as a helper, but as someone capable of creating change. Someone whose life could extend its reach far beyond her own small world. Her acts of kindness, once thought invisible, now had the potential to ripple out and touch countless others. Through it all, Mara never lost her humility. She continued to treat every customer with the same patience and warmth, continued to care for her brother, and continued to dream about the impact she could have in her community. The difference now was that she had the means and the support to make those dreams real. She understood that her life was changing not because she had sought recognition, but because her genuine compassion had touched someone who could help her see the value of her own heart as the weeks turned into months. Mara began to feel a sense of confidence she had never known. She could pursue her studies, plan for her future, and continue giving back to her community. She realized that true kindness, offered without expectation, could lead to opportunities that were unimaginable when approached with a mindset of reward. Her life, once constrained by struggle and self-doubt, was beginning to expand in ways that she had only ever dreamed of. All because she had remained true to herself and her values. And in those moments of reflection, Mara understood something profound, that a single act of kindness, even one that seems small or unnoticed, could create ripples far beyond her imagination. She realized that her life, once limited by circumstance, was now full of potential she could embrace because someone had seen her for who she truly was. Someone who believed in her as much as she had always believed in the goodness of others. Mara's life began to change in ways she had never imagined. With Arthur's support, she enrolled in a social work program. Something she had always dreamed about but thought impossible. At first, it felt surreal to attend classes, to sit in a classroom surrounded by books and ideas she had only read about. While knowing that someone of Arthur's experience believed in her potential, every day, as she walked to class, she felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. But beneath it all was a quiet confidence, a sense that her life was finally moving in a direction she had long hoped for. Her days became busy, but she managed them with the same resilience she had always shown. She still worked part-time at the grocery store to stay connected to her community and to maintain her sense of purpose in small, everyday acts. Helping customers, chatting with regulars, and lifting spirits through small gestures reminded her of the world she wanted to impact. But now, she also had the time, resources, and education to make a larger difference. She felt a new energy, a combination of hope, responsibility, and excitement about the future. Sam, her younger brother, noticed the changes too. He was proud of Mara in ways he could not fully express. The two of them shared quiet moments after school, discussing her classes, his own small triumphs at school, and their plans for the future. Mara began to feel that the weight she had carried for so long was becoming lighter, not because her responsibilities had lessened, but because she finally had support, both emotionally and practically. Arthur's belief in her had shown her that she was not alone, and that giving and receiving could coexist in a way that strengthened her purpose. As Mara progressed in her studies, she also began volunteering in community programs. She helped organize food drives, mentored young children, and supported families in need. Every act she performed now had a bigger impact, amplified by the knowledge, skills, and resources she was gaining through her education. She started small programs in her neighborhood to help underprivileged children with homework and to provide basic necessities to families struggling financially. People who had once taken her kindness for granted began to notice her leadership and initiative. Mara realized that her quiet compassion had grown into a force that could touch lives in ways she had never imagined. Arthur continued to be a guiding presence in her life. He never interfered, never demanded anything from her. Instead, he encouraged her to think bigger, to take risks, and to trust herself. Sometimes, when she felt overwhelmed or uncertain, he reminded her of the first time they had met, the rainy evening when she had helped him without a thought. "You've always had this strength," he would say. "You just needed to see it in yourself." His words became a source of motivation, a quiet anchor that reminded her that her actions, no matter how small, could have profound effects. Over time, Mara's confidence grew. She realized that her kindness, patience, and empathy were not just traits of her personality. They were tools she could use to change the world. She no longer doubted that her small gestures mattered. Every smile she shared, every moment she spent helping someone, became part of a larger purpose. She understood that true compassion had a ripple effect, that the warmth she offered could spread, inspiring others to act with care and empathy as well. Mara's work in the community began to attract attention. Local organizations noticed her dedication. She was invited to speak at community events about her experiences and the importance of kindness and service. She shared her story honestly, including the struggles she had faced, the challenges of raising her brother alone, and the moment when someone finally saw her efforts and offered support. Her story resonated deeply with people, inspiring them to recognize the value of small acts of kindness in their own lives. Mara realized that her life, once limited by circumstance and struggle, had become a platform to inspire others. Even with all these changes, Mara remained grounded. She never forgot the simple lesson she had learned growing up, that kindness mattered more than recognition, that small gestures could change lives, and that true compassion required patience, humility, and a willingness to see the world through the eyes of others. She continued to treat every person she met with respect and care, whether they were wealthy, struggling, young, or old. Her life was a reflection of her values, amplified now by the resources and support that allowed her to reach further and touch more lives. Mara, also, began planning long-term projects. With Arthur's guidance, she helped establish a local foundation focused on providing educational support, food, and mentorship to children in underprivileged communities. She worked tirelessly, coordinating volunteers, raising awareness, and ensuring that the programs were sustainable. The foundation became a symbol of what one person's quiet compassion, combined with opportunity and support, could achieve. Families who once struggled to get by began to feel hope, and children who had little guidance found mentors and role models in Mara and her team. Looking back, Mara often reflected on the moment that had started it all, the rainy evening, when she had helped a stranger without expecting anything. She realized that her life had changed because she had acted from her heart without thought of reward or recognition. That single act of kindness had set in motion a series of events that had transformed her life and the lives of countless others. She had learned that compassion had its own power, a quiet strength that could open doors, build connections, and create opportunities that seemed impossible. Mara's relationship with Arthur remained a steady, supportive presence. He continued to offer advice, encouragement, and guidance, but never demanded anything in return. Over time, they became close friends, bonded not by wealth or status, but by mutual respect and shared values. Mara appreciated his mentorship, but she never felt overshadowed. Instead, she felt empowered, knowing that her own actions and decisions were shaping her path. She realized that while support could change circumstances, it was her own dedication, resilience, and kindness that had made her worthy of that support in the first place. Years passed, and Mara's life blossomed in ways she had once only dreamed of. She graduated with honors, became a licensed social worker, and expanded her community programs to reach more neighborhoods. Her work touched hundreds of lives, from children needing mentorship to families struggling to survive. She continued to balance her career, community work, and caring for her brother, now grown and thriving. Mara had learned to embrace both giving and receiving, understanding that true generosity allowed room for support, growth, and collaboration. Despite her accomplishments, Mara never lost sight of the simple truths that had guided her from the beginning, that every act of kindness mattered, that patience and empathy could change lives, and that small gestures could create ripples far beyond what anyone could see. She continued to work in ways both big and small, knowing that her daily choices, her compassion, and her dedication would continue to shape the world around her. Mara's story became an inspiration. People admired her not for wealth, fame, or status, but for the authenticity, kindness, and courage that had carried her through life's challenges. She had transformed her own struggles into a source of strength, and her life had become a testament to the power of compassion, the importance of believing in oneself, and the unexpected ways in which kindness could change everything. And in the quiet moments, Mara still thought back to that rainy evening, the moment she had believed her kindness went unnoticed. She now knew that it never had. Every gesture, every act of care had mattered. It had been noticed by someone who had the power to change her life. Yes, but even more importantly, it had mattered because it came from her heart. That understanding stayed with her forever, guiding her as she continued to make a difference. One kind act at a time. This completes the story in full, showing Mara's transformation, the ripple effect of her kindness, and how her life is forever changed.